How in the world?
But he's really nice. He told me a lot about his life.
So this is the number.
This is
We might call that tomorrow just to find out who that is.
this was next.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to open the meeting. Jody, would you like to lead us in a pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Before we start the meeting, I just want to give a little bit of an update on COVID. You know, throughout COVID, the city has had a myriad of positions ranging from restrictions, requirements, guidelines, so on and so forth. And we like to think that we ebbed and flow with the level of COVID that was locally. A couple of months ago, we removed all restrictions that pertain to non-city facilities, which means the rest of the city. But we did have in place a handful that pertained to City Hall and city employees. In light of the continued lack of cases, and fortunately in recent weeks, no deaths, nobody in the hospital, nobody in ventilators and things like that, tomorrow we're going to be implementing the final changes to the city facilities with the exception of the center. So tomorrow for city employees and city facilities other than the center, we will be migrating to recommendations and not any requirements. So as far as tonight, I leave it up to everybody's best judgment. Our suggestion with respect to all of this is to be respectful of the person next to you if you can't maintain the 6 feet. But for the most part, everybody's on their own to make that decision. We have no public hearings for tonight. We have a couple of acknowledgements. I'm sorry, no acknowledgements, but we have 2 special presentations. First is the RMU second quarter report. Rodney?
Thank you, Mayor. So if we have a lot of new council people, my name is Rodney Board. Excuse me, I'm the General Manager of Rolla Utilities. So kind of just formalities, just kind of a little bit of information. So the city ordinance requires that I come, or RMU comes and does a quarterly presentation. Obviously that happens about every 3 months. Usually what I do is do a summary of what we've been doing, activities we've been doing for the last 3 months, and then usually there's some additional information that I'm going to provide. Sometimes it's required by ordinance. So tonight we're going to talk about a rate comparison study that we do every year. Again, that's a city ordinance requirement, so we want to present that information. And then we've had a few other topics that have come up that I want to just talk about briefly about. So I apologize for a little bit for the lengthiness of this. I'll try and move it along pretty quick. So again, push this one more time. Are you guys seeing it on your screens?
Not yet.
Let's try that. All right.
Yep.
Okay. So this is just a summary of the actual report. The quarterly report's on our website and available to anyone that wants to see it for the public. The other thing I would say that if any of the council members, new or existing, would like to sit down, spend a couple hours with me, learn more about the utility, I can take you out on a tour a couple of our facilities, our operations center, and so you can get a little more feel of what we do, why we do it, and learn. So I've had several council people over the years do that, and I think they've always come back with appreciation of what we do.
Rodney, before you go on,
Yes, sir.
we are going to have throughout the summer a number of formal presentations by city partners, Chamber and Economic Development and RMU. So I would encourage if we could have that particular session
Sure.
before they actually come and
Yeah,
visit
absolutely.
you. Having a couple of people go and others not go is not going to be a
Right. No,
efficient use of your time.
No, that'd be
their
just
time.
fine. Perfect.
So, but okay.
All right, so let's kind of go through. So I'm going to again, just kind of go through a little bit of information about our financials, projects we have going on, again, some updates, and then that comparative rate information. So one thing I wanted to point out, and I have this in my presentation, I've had it in here for a couple of years. The utility was founded in 1945. Actually, I think our incorporation date was right around October 31st of 1945. That's when the city bought back the assets from the private utility company that was operating the water and electric systems here in town. And so in November of 45, the board came out with a public statement. It was in the Rolla Herald at the time. But the only thing I wanted to point out was a few things that are still true today, what was published just over 75 years ago. So our policies operate on a business basis, so we operate a little bit different. We don't operate like a classic governmental utility. We try to operate more on a business basis than governmental. And back then, the board said we had 3 primary obligations. One, of course, which is still our motto today, give the best possible service to the citizens of Rolla. Number 2 is accumulate funds for the payment of indebtedness. Again, that was mainly focused around repaying the debt of buying the utility and getting those bonds paid off. But I think today it's still true that we're trying to accumulate funds. We're abhorrent to debt generally. We still have one small lease purchase out there, but generally we try not to borrow money. We try not to go into debt. We try to pay for things as we need them and as we move along. And then lastly was build reserve funds for any emergency and replacement equipment. And again, I think we've been trying to be very good stewards of our public's money in how we build our reserves and manage our reserves to make sure that we have those for emergencies. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit when we talk about the February storm we had and how important it was to have reserves on hand. Again, real quick financial recap. I'm not going to go through every line item, but what I do is try and compare where we are currently year to date with where we were at the same point in time last year. And you can see our operating revenues generally about $16 million of revenues. Very little change there. We haven't had any rate changes, so we're staying pretty consistent. Operating expenses are up quite a bit, and again, that's mainly due to the February winter storm Uri. We incurred quite a significant cost for power supply in the month of February. Almost to the tune of just almost $4 million. So that's a significant hit on our bottom line there. So it shows our operating income is down about $3.7 million. We have additional income and expenses. This is what you're seeing here is a significant increase. So that is proceeds from the sale of our transmission and related assets to AXTI, Ameren, a division of Ameren. And then finally, you see the bottom line, kind of we're up about a little over $4 million. Almost $5 million year to date, up significantly from last year. But again, that's all mainly due to the sale of some transmission assets to Ameren or AXTI.
Hey, Ronnie, before you go to the next slide, for the benefit of the new council, several years ago, the board adopted on a policy to lower rates.
Correct.
Can you share that with the council persons and the underlying reasons for it?
All right, so that actually happened. We've been doing, or we did for about 3 or 4 years, a power cost adjustment on our rates. What that was is a way we could return money back to our customers. We had gotten to the point where our reserves were fully funded. I would call them now our regular reserves were fully funded. And so once you got to that point, there's really no reason for us to hold on to more money than was necessary to operate the utility and to make sure we had reserves for emergency purposes. So next quarter when I come back, I'm going to talk about our budget. And in our budget, we have a minimum reserve policy statement, which says how we determine how much reserves we need to have on hand. But once we get to that limit, generally speaking, we don't really need any more. It's enough money to buy, one of our largest assets, fixed assets, is transformers at our main substation. If one of those were to fail, we're talking $1.2 million, $1.5 million, and long lead times to get those. But you want to have reserves for those types of things. Same thing that most people don't realize, but all our overhead lines, transmission lines, our power lines, transformers on poles, none of that is insured. That is not an insurable asset. So if you have a tornado, if we had a weather event, and it cut through a lot of our power poles. Those are not insured assets, so we're going to be responsible for replacing those assets and whatever it takes to get those put up. Again, that's why we won't have those reserves. So what a few years back, we were getting to that limit, and so we implemented a power cost adjustment. What that did is start reducing our rates so we can put more money, keep more money in our customers' pocket. About 2 years ago, on the electric side, we eliminated the power cost adjustment and lowered rates. And what we did is lower rates about 1 cent per kilowatt hour. So our current KWH rate is 7.9 cents over a residential customer, and most of our competition in the area are in 8 cents, 9 cents, or something a little bit higher than that. So our rates, we've lowered our rates down, and again, the purpose is to, we don't really need to build any additional equity in our reserve fund, and so it's a way to keep more money in our customers' pocket. Does that fairly answer your question? We did, on the water side, we did have some 2 water rate increases over the last 2 years. The water department, we've been worked very hard over the last probably almost 20 years to make it more independent, stand on its own. As we've done that, it's been able to keep up with its operating and maintenance requirements, operating that system, getting water out of the ground, getting it to our customers. Where we've fallen short historically for the last several years is capital improvements. Replacing water mains is a very expensive endeavor. For example, Kings Highway was a little over $500,000, almost $600,000 job to replace the water mains in Kings Highway. So we need to make sure we have adequate assets and reserves for doing those types of projects. But that's where we're falling a little bit short, so we did do some water rate increases on the water side, mainly to cover capital expenses. That work? All right. And again, we're trying to operate a pretty transparent operation. If ever you have any questions about our finances or operations, I'm always available to take those messages. So next thing is talk a little bit about electric department. And again, I'm not going to hit everything. Some of the major projects, we just finished up getting our power poles off Kings Highway. I think one of the communication providers finally got off the remaining ones, so we pulled all those poles. Doesn't mean we're completely done. We still are working, I think Burger King now, we just removed the services, but some of the facilities on the backside need some additional upgrades, but our focus was getting the poles off the sidewalks and the new corridor. Still got a little bit of work to clean up on the backsides, but generally speaking, we're wrapped up there. We're starting to look at plans for University Drive relocation as University and the TD starts planning the new roundabout at 12th and Bishop area. And as part of that project, we recently worked with University to repower their substation, which involved, we had to eliminate the lines serving the substation that they own and bring that, they had a contractor bring that in underground from a different location. So we worked closely with the University on a repowering project. Those are some of the major things going on, but the line crews are working all over town doing different projects, and right now we're getting into our summer construction season. On the water side, just a few things. We've been working a lot on Oak Street. We finished water main construction there, a replacement, but the water crew's been working with the Public Works Department because they're doing a lot of storm sewer relocations, the streets, curbs, everything, so we've been working closely with the water department down there. Another thing that we've been doing, I'm going to talk about water main replacements a little bit, but one of the things we're having problems with, and I've showed this past councils, is our copper service lines, especially copper service lines that have been installed relatively new. In the last 20, 25 years or so, we're having a terrible time with them holding up over time. This one came out of Yale Drive, which is behind Furniture Factory Outlet. This was removed several years ago. But what happens is we're getting deterioration in the copper. It starts as a little hole, eventually just blows them out, and we lose water pressure to a customer. It's not a hazardous situation, it's just we're losing water on the copper service line. So a couple of years we instituted, or the board instituted, a service line replacement crew in addition to our normal water crew. And that's one of their primary objectives, is replacing service lines with copper service lines with PEX pipe, which is a type of plastic. And they've been working on Scottsvale, Chestwood Court, Viburnum, Peachtree, kind of over by the junior high, and they've been moving around town. But they're kind of hitting some of the newer. Some of these are older areas, but trying to focus on newer areas where we're having most of our trouble on the copper service lines.
Rodney, again, for the benefit of the new council persons, can you talk about the policy of who's responsible for what water line.
Oh, yes. So that typically comes up when you have a customer issue or where does the customer start and end? So the customer owns the entire service line from the water main all the way to their house. So all the way out into the street, the customer owns that. But by ordinance, Rolla Municipal Utilities is responsible for maintaining all the service lines that are within the public right-of-way. What that generally means is from the water main, if the meter is about the right spot at the property line, generally we're going to maintain all that. We don't own it, but we're responsible for maintaining that within the public right-of-way. Then once you get onto private property, that's when the customers take over and are responsible for their own service lines. The other thing, kind of dovetailing on what I was talking about service lines, we typically don't see problems on the customer side. When the copper is buried in dirt, when it's buried on the private side, we don't see a lot of problems. Where we're seeing the copper service line failures are out in the public right away. Typically they're buried in clean rock. I think we got a combination of inferior copper materials and maybe some cathodic corrosion issues and some other things going on, but that's where we see most of our problems. We typically don't see it on the customer side of the meter. And again, assuming that meter is in the right spot. Got some weird places in town where we find water meters where we don't expect to find them, but generally that's kind of how that works out.
So Rodney, just if the water meter is halfway to the line, halfway to the house or on the house, it is still the customer's responsibility
Right.
from
Once
the right of way.
you get on the private property, it's their responsibility. I will tell you, just experience is if the water meter is 3 or 4 feet onto the private, and we're seeing a leak around the boundary, we're going to go check it out and figure out what's going on there, and typically we'll fix it. Only because sometimes it's very difficult to tell, and again, you're kind of making the property line as a boundary. Sometimes it's difficult to tell if is it 1 foot on the private side, on the public side. Usually we're going to dig that up and check that out. All right. Just some miscellaneous things that I'm going to talk about. Street repairs. And again, I'm going to talk about water main replacements in a little bit, talk about street repairs, but one thing I'll point out is over the last quarter we spent about $72,000 in asphalt repairs, and that's replacing where we have tore up Steve streets and done some water main replacements. We pay for the damage that we do, and the city invoices us and we pay that bill. We report that to the board all the time. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. I'm going to talk about the mid-February cold snap here in a little bit too. And then legislatively, just kind of the legislative session ended last Friday. One of the projects we've been following for the last 5 years is the Grain Belt Express. That's a transmission line that's going to carry less expensive wind power from western Kansas across Kansas and across Missouri, maybe to points east, but generally we're more focused on that power being delivered in Missouri to our communities. Over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been legislative efforts to try and stop that project. I can report tonight that the session ended on Friday without any action taken on the Grain Belt Express, so that project's back. Hopefully got full steam going. I think they're going to be making some pretty good progress in the next year as they move forward with that project. I think that's all I'm going to talk about on that particular section. And again, there's more information in the quarterly report online. But if anyone has any questions, if they read something and they want to talk about it, we can. So let's talk about Winter Storm Uri. I was at council back in late February and did a report for them, kind of some of what we're seeing after the winter storm. So mid-February, around President's Day, we had a tremendous snowstorm come through our state, but there was a tremendous amount of cold air that went all the way from the Canadian border all the way down as far south as Houston, very widespread and very long-lasting, and it caused a lot of problems in the electric industry and natural gas industry both for about 3 or 4 days. Now, I'm not going to go rehash all what happened, but I do want to talk about what that impact was to the utility here locally. So for us, we had about $3.6 million, $4 million of additional power supply costs. Our normal February power bill is about $1.8, $1.9 million, and it was over $5 million for the month. Significant impact for us. That equates to about 20% of our annual power bill was just within, the impact of that was felt within only about 4 days. Just to kind of give you an idea of the magnitude of that impact. And within a week, power markets, everything was back to normal after everything kind of recovered. But it could have been much worse. So we're seeing some of our counterparts in the state, other municipalities, they're looking for costs and a higher percentage. If that would have been us, we could have been looking at about $10 million of overrun than the 3.6. So we feel, I hate to say it, it sounds bad to say we feel fortunate it was only 3.6 million. We'd rather had it none. But we definitely could have seen a lot worse situation for Rolla than what we actually did. Good news for us is because I've talked a lot about the reserves, but because we have our reserves built up, we're able to absorb that cost impact to us, and we've absorbed that, and we have no plans for surcharges at this moment in time. We are seeing some cities, other neighboring cities, that are doing surcharges to try and recover this cost. We feel very happy that our financial situation here in Rolla is much better sometimes than other communities. And then our plan is to rebuild those reserves back over the next few years, but again, it's not immediate, but we do want to get those reserves, those regular reserves, built back to where they should be. So we're working on that. So again, a pretty significant event. I spoke about it when I was on KTTR last month, a month or so ago, and also spoke at a Rotary Club, I believe it was a Rotary Club, about it. The other thing I wanted to talk about that's kind of something that has come up recently is water main replacements. And again, this is kind of something that we've been doing for 25 years. So as prior management, prior board, back in the mid-90s, along with the city passing a tax to do street reconstructions, the Board of Public Works and the previous RMU management made, I think, an excellent decision to try and replace as much water main as we could in those streets prior to getting a new asphalt surface put down. So back in the 80s, 90s, we had, I guess, a lot of trouble with water main breaks, and so this was an effort to try and stem the tide. And if the city was going to be spending money on repairing streets, rebuilding streets, we wanted to spend money to start rebuilding and replacing water mains. So we've been doing that now going on about 25 years. Since the mid-90s, we've had active. At one time, we had 2 water crews. That's all they did full-time, was replace water mains. Now we got 1 crew working on water mains, another crew working on service lines, and they kind of go back and forth. But generally speaking, we've replaced or installed about 70% of our entire water main system in the last 25 years. And I think that's an outstanding testament to our crews. And again, past management for making, I think, an excellent decision to start trying to fix these problems. I think, in talking with Dan, my predecessor, he often said, we didn't get into this problem overnight, we're not going to solve it overnight, but you got to start. You got to start working on it. So it's been a very methodical project thing that we've been doing for the last 25 years. We do work closely and in partnership with Public Works. Every year they're giving us information about what water main or what streets they plan to reconstruct, and then we're selecting what water mains we think we can accomplish and get replaced within the construct of their projects. Again, our goal is to try and get as much done in conjunction with their projects so we're not tearing up other streets. That does happen. I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But our focus is try and work within those. So our goal is to reduce the frequency of water main breaks, which I think we're doing a pretty good job of. That doesn't mean we don't have water main breaks. We still got a lot of old main in the ground. But we're reducing the frequencies of the breaks. But while we're doing this, we're not just going back. If we had a 6-inch pipe, we're not going back with a 6-inch pipe. We may be going back with 8-inch, maybe going back with 12-inch pipe to get higher flows. For the fire department, we're installing additional fire hydrants, so we're not just putting the fire hydrants back. We're generally looking at, do we need better fire hydrant coverage? And again, we're looking at all those things to try and improve our system, not just replace its status quo. Because of that, and some additional water storage tanks that we put in, we've got an ISO Class 1 water system. So ISO is Insurance Services Organization, I believe. They come in, they rate water systems, they rate fire departments. And when they've rated our system based on its flow, its capabilities, it's a Class 1 water system, which is the best you can get. And I'd say we're one of the few cities in outstate Missouri that can achieve those kinds of flow rates. So we're very proud of that. I mentioned we got about 70%, about 100 miles to replace. That means we still got 40 miles of old main, which is, again, not going to get fixed overnight, but it's something we're working on, again, mainly in conjunction with Public Works. The other thing I'll point out that we do work on other water mains that have deteriorated sufficiently, and that's kind of a vague term, but it means we're having a lot of problems with water mains. And we will do those if they need replacement outside of the city's normal schedule. So, for example, we have replaced water mains in Greenbrier, Whitney, Fox Creek, Old English, Hawthorne, Crabapple for various reasons. A lot of times it's because we're having a lot of water main breaks. Sometimes we're getting, in the case of Hawthorne and Crabapple, we're getting water quality issues. It was an old main, it was dead-ended, it was steel, so it was starting to flake and rust, and we're getting a lot of issues of debris in the water. And so that's why it was replaced. It was becoming a problem, not from more aesthetics. Water wasn't hazardous, but it's more of an aesthetic issue. But for various reasons, we replaced water mains on that basis. Greenbrier, for example, it wasn't we're getting a water main break once a year. We're getting water main breaks all the time. Sometimes we go do a fix and be there just within a couple days, fixing within just a couple feet of the other problem. So it wasn't uncommon for us to have several water main breaks in a very close time frame, and over the course of time, we identify which are the what I call really troubled water mains. Again, that doesn't mean we don't have water main breaks in other streets, but we try and identify the worst offenders and try and, if we have to, go in and do that and take care of those. So we budget about $600,000 to $700,000 annually to do water main replacements. We will try we try and do a good job of managing that money. As I mentioned before, Kings Highway really drove that up this year. We'll probably spend $1 million, $1.1 million this year in water main replacements, mainly somewhat covering costs at Kings Highway. But again, because we're doing Kings Highway, it's a major street project, we don't want to be back in there and tearing that up at a later date. So that's completely replaced, plus the service lines are all replaced. Everything's new in that roadway. And then the other thing I want to point out is, I've talked a little bit about asphalt, but on average, we average about $100,000 a year fixing asphalt. That's sometimes some for water leaks, but sometimes it's for doing Greenbrier, Whitney, Fox Creek, some of these other projects. Because it's not a street overlay project, we're on the hook to replace and fix those trenches. So that's one of the reasons we try not to do those projects unless we can work it in with the street project, because I'd rather spend $100,000 on water main replacements, not on asphalt. So to kind of give you an idea of what we have going on there. So, and again, I'd be happy, before I go on to the next stuff, I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Any questions for Rodney on the water?
All right. And again, you might get questions on, and we can deal with this on some things, but roadway lighting, you as council people, you may get calls on street lighting or roadway lighting, deposits, rates, and anything that comes up. Always feel free to send emails into John. He'll get them to me, and we'll figure out how we can respond to any constituent that you got, any citizen that has a concern over any of that kind of stuff. The other thing I'd point out is if you ever decide to do a ward meeting in your ward, I'm available to come talk at those, or just have a booth and answer questions if you have anyone that has questions for us. All right, so now let's talk about water supply. I'm going to talk about rates, but when we talk about rates, you need to really think about what services you're getting. So when I mention electric and water supply, usually you get the typical answers, drinking water, washing the dishes, showers. When electricity, you flip the switch on, the power comes on, lights come on, those kinds of things. The real basic stuff. But what we have to think about at the utility is not only those items, but we have to think about fire protection. Is the fire department going to have adequate flows? Are we providing the services we need to protect the community and have a long-term plan for power supply, ice storms, all those things? That's what we're thinking about. Beyond making sure the power is reliable, we need to think about all the emergencies, all the bad things that can go wrong in the city. So it's more about drinking water. We think about water main and age, like I've just mentioned, and the size of those. We think about fire protection. Do we have adequate wells? Do we have adequate storage, again, to have the water supply we need? We need reliable equipment. We gotta have materials in stock. You can't go, as I've said in past meetings, you can't go down to Walmart and buy C900 pipe that we buy. You got to have that stuff in stock, and you'd be surprised how many times we get called from other utilities asking, hey, can we get some pipe, can we get some fittings, those kinds of things. So it's important that we have this stuff on hand, not only for emergencies, but just for our normal work. And then, of course, we want skilled and trained staff. Same on the electric side, same type of things. We want high capacity. We want to make sure we're planning for the future. We need reliability, safety. We want to plan for growth as the city expands. Again, we got very specialized equipment. Try to have as much material in stock as we can. Now, we can't have it for every emergency, but we try to have that and that especially that trained staff. So again, what we're trying to do is, if we only had to supply water, drinking water to the community, we probably could do the entire city with maybe 4-inch main, maybe a 6-inch main. That's all we would need if we didn't need fire hydrants. We would have a lot smaller main throughout town. But because we have those needs, those demands for fire flow, we have the largest mains we have in town are 16-inch water mains. So as we've been replacing and doing all the work we do, we're upgrading our pipes and upgrading those flow and those capacities. We could have just flush hydrants like this one, or we want double steamers that can flow the water that the fire department needs. And again, larger mains. We could have smaller water tanks, but we want fire protection. We want to make sure we're building a system that's going to have the capacity we need. So we have about 7 million gallons of water storage in town. Again, much more. Actually, we're probably overbuilt in how much water we have. But again, it's that mentality of we want to be prepared. Substations, this is all from it. Again, planning for the future, making sure we have substations that we can grow as the city expands. And again, I think we did a really good job of building the substation, again, planning for some growth. And again, we want a modern equipment fleet. This picture is actually fairly old, but we want to make sure we got our line trucks, backhoes, all the equipment that we use day to day. And having that highly skilled and highly trained staff is super critical. We want the materials in stock. Again, this is just some pictures of our laydown yards, water materials, electrical things, those types of things. So again, times have changed. We have greater obligations today than we used to. This was in the 60s. This was one of the original, I don't know about the original, but one of the fire trucks. One of the fire trucks back in the day. Well, they can only pump so much water. And so the system we had back in the day was designed and built around the equipment that we had to pump water out of those things. Well, it's all changed today. I don't think that's the newest truck in Chief's fleet, but that can pump a lot of water. And so, again, we're planning for those types of things, larger fire hydrants with more access ports, larger water mains, all those kinds of things. In fact, it's gotten to the point where our system flows so well is when we do have a water main break, we can wash a street out with as much water as will flow. That never happened 20 years ago. Today it can happen easily. So again, kind of testament to how much water we can flow in a very short period of time. But again, it's planning to make sure we can keep up with the fire department. And again, back in this house back in the day, we wouldn't have had air conditioning. We've had air conditioning. We had more load, those kinds of things, even though I think I've said our sales per customer is dwindling, but again, as we've grown the system, we've added a lot of things. So again, when I talk about rates, I want you to think about what are the services, what are you getting that you don't always think about? You know, what are the services that we're providing? So safe and reliable water supply, expanded, more reliable power system. We work very hard on that. Our Class 1 rate water system, and you're getting service 24 hours a day. If you call 364-2195, which is our 24-hour number, you're going to get an RNU person. And he is going to, if he can't solve the problem, he's going to get the people on the phone. That's 24/7. That's 3 o'clock in the morning. We've had people call in, have a water pipe break in their house. 3 o'clock in the morning, he can get out there and take care of it. If it's a power outage, he can call the linemen in to take care of it. So whether it's, and if the chief, if we have a fire, our guy can get out there, disconnect. If it's a simple residential, he can disconnect the meter so the fire department can make safe entry. If we need to, if it's a commercial building, we'll get people out there to do it. So you're getting 24-hour service to make sure that system, our system, is reliable. The other thing we've learned over the years is water and electric supply is just one key to economic development. If you don't have reasonable rates, if you don't have the system that developers and large industrial companies are looking for, it hinders your ability to land those types of development. So that's just one key to economic development. And then the other thing I want to point out is infrastructure requirements that we do a lot of times are relative to decisions made by the city council. So, for example, in the past the city has talked about growth to the west of town. Well, as soon as the city starts talking about growth to the west of the town, we're thinking about how are we going to supply power out there. And a lot of times we get out front of that discussion and start acquiring land just in case it happens. So a good example is Southside annexation back in the 90s. When the city started talking about annexing 1,350 acres to the south side, we started looking at how are we going to support that growth. So we bought land on Dewing Lane. We bought land on South Rolla Street for water towers, wells, substations, well in advance of the actual annexation happening to make sure we were already there. We've already bought property on the west side of town for potential substation or maybe water facilities. Or if we decide, the city says we're going to go east, we don't have anything bought that direction, but we think about how we would serve those types of areas. So a lot of the decisions we're making are relative to what the city and what growth plans the city might have. All right, so why we all came here. So what we do annually, and again, this is city ordinance, we do a poll, send out a survey to the utilities in about a 60-mile radius of Rolla just to see if you were to purchase 4,000, in this case we're going to talk about water first. If a customer buys 4,000 gallons of water from you, what is the cost of that water? And we ask them to include whatever charges the utility would normally provide. So we don't include our pilot that we've transferred to the city. We're talking what's the base cost of that water. And you can see we're about 3/4 of the way down. If you buy 4,000 gallons of water, it's $24 in Rolla. You can see there's most of us are in that mid-20s, low to mid-20s, sometimes even low 30s. That's kind of the bulk of us. But then you have some outliers in St. James, Cuba, Lebanon. Rates are considerably lower. And then conversely, in the water district number 2 of Phelps County, which surrounds Rolla, they're almost twice what our rate is. Kind of thinking about rates, when you think about rates, is if you're starting to generate too much reserves, either your rates are too high or you're not investing enough money in your system. If your reserves start to dwindle, either your rates are too low or you're investing too much in your system. That's kind of how we think about it. So as we try and find that balance of that, and our goal here is to be kind of about where we are. I don't, going forward, and again, it's subject to change, we try and think about what rates might look like in the next 5 years. Right now, I'm not seeing any indication we'd have to do anything unless something else changes. So right now, I think we're in a pretty good spot on water rates. Again, always subject to change based on our capital needs and projects that might come about. So any questions on the water rates? But again, these are utilities within about 60-mile radius of town. And then, and you can see the ones that are red have done a rate change. So there's some movement in some of those rates. I didn't do the comparisons from previous years, but we do the same thing with all the electric providers in the region. And again, we kind of look at how much would 600 kilowatt hours cost, how much would 1,100, which is kind of about an average customer over the course of a year, and 2,000 kilowatt hours would be more of a higher user that might have electric heat and use more energy. It's also broke down into 4 tiers. You got the IOU, which is Ameren. We're getting harder and harder to get any rate information out of Ameren as our normal contact, I think, has moved on, so we've had a hard time finding someone to get the reply back. But generally speaking, we're pretty comparable to what Ameren's charging. They have summer and winter rates, but generally if you look at some blended averages, we're pretty close to where they are. Next, I've got the co-ops, the 5 co-ops that reply. We've got the MPEP cities, which are the formerly served cities that were served by Show Me Power. They have their own power pool. So we have that group. And then the MOPEP cities, which Rolla belongs to, that's our power pool of 35 cities and kind of how we compare. And I think categorically in almost every category, you're going to find us at the low end. And again, we're looking at residential rates. This might be a different story if we looked at industrial rates or some of our larger customers, but on the residential rates, by far and large, we appear to be on the low end of the cost for electricity in our region. And with that, I think that's all I have tonight. Again, I apologize for this being a little bit longer. I'll kind of cut this down next year, but I want to kind of give you a good basis of what we do, why we do it. So, and again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have
Any
on
questions?
this or any topic.
Any questions for Rodney? If not, thank you, Rodney.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, was there a question?
No, I'm
Oh.
All right, thank you again.
to John.
May I make a, I just want to say, Rodney, I'm sorry, you don't have to come back up here, but I really appreciate that presentation, and it's really awesome to see the long-term thought process that's gone on to this, and it looks like it's been quite a success. So it's good to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is a presentation of the fiscal 2020 audit. Is Stephanie going to introduce it?
I'm just going to step up and turn it on over to Michael. I think he's logged in this Zoom meeting, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions when he's finished.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Again, my name is Michael Keenan. I'm with the auditing firm of Cochran, Head, Vick & Company. They're here to present the results of the September 30, 2020 audit. I believe everyone has received the 3 documents. The larger document is the basic financial statements and independent auditors report. Also, the single audit, which is the audit of the city's federal expenditures. And finally, the required communications and management letter. And so now I'm going to have a PowerPoint to kind of summarize and go over the results of our audit. Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right. Again, this is a report to the Honorable Mayor and City Council, again, for the financial reporting and compliance audit for the year ended September 30, 2020. A little bit about Cochran, Head, Vick & Company. We've been serving Missouri and Kansas since 1975. We have a peer review, which is another outside auditing firm will come in and review our quality control standards. And we have been awarded the highest rating as a result of that review. We're members of professional organizations, including the AICPA Government Audit Quality Center, and 2 of our members of our governmental service team review Government Finance Officer Association special review reports, and we're licensed both in the state of Kansas and Missouri. The scope of our audit, again, we were engaged to audit the financial statements of the city of Rolla, Missouri, and also the single audit, which again is the audit of the city's federal awards. There were 2 major programs in the single audit for this year. Those were the airport improvement runway, which was runway grant funds, which was over $2.6 million. And also there were water treatment plant improvements. The funds available for that came from the SRF, again, Clean Water Loan. Our responsibilities is to conduct our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, government auditing standards, as well as the uniform guidance. The uniform guidance dictates our procedures as related to federal awards. We're also responsible to plan and perform our audit to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance that the basic financial statements are free of material misstatement. We're also responsible to report on the internal controls over financial reporting, as well as the city's compliance with laws and regulations. The Auditing Standards Board of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the AICPA, recommend that we communicate these matters to the governing board. Illegal acts, none came to our attention as a result of performing our audit procedures. There were no changes in significant accounting policies during the year. We're pleased to report we had no difficulties or disagreements with management, and we had full cooperation, access to all the books and records. In general, a financial and compliant audit addresses really three basic questions. The first question, are the financial statements free of material misstatement? And again, our response is we have issued an unmodified opinion that indeed the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. Sometimes an unmodified opinion is deemed as a clean opinion. Again, that's the highest level of opinion that we can provide on financial statements. The second question, are internal controls over financial reporting adequately designed and operating effectively? We did identify a certain deficiency in internal controls that we considered to be a material weakness. That relates to financial reporting, and that is covered in the document called Required Communications and Management Letter. And what that relates to is during the course of our audit, we identified certain adjustments that were needed to the city's financial statements that were material to the financial statements, but were not identified by the city's internal controls. And the city has, again, made their response to really beef up year-end closing processes, especially related to the issuance of bonds. Again, we made some certain adjustments related to that. The final question, do the city of Rolla comply in all material respects with finance-related laws and regulations? Again, in our opinion, the city did indeed comply in all material respects with finance-related laws and regulations. And those reports are included in the single audit report, which identifies our reporting requirements and our opinion that indeed there were no material non-compliance issues. Also included in the Required Communications and Management Letter are other suggestions for the best practices and possible improvements in internal control. And one recommendation that we wanted to have the city management certainly review and is key employees and cross-training, trying to look forward to succession planning as key members of management may be retiring or have an unscheduled leave of absence. The second recommendation, there are a number of future accounting pronouncements that will be implemented over the next few years. Again, we don't see that any of those are going to have a significant impact on the city's financial statements. And Cochran had that. Vic certainly appreciates the opportunity to serve as the city's auditors. Special thanks to Mr. Butts, the city administrator, and Stephanie Rogers, the finance director, as well as all the city staff that helped participate in the audit. Very professional and a pleasure to work with. That concludes my PowerPoint presentation. Are there any questions I might be able to answer?
Any questions for Michael?
You spoke about internal control.
Yes.
Did you make any recommendations about the deficiencies?
Okay, I don't know if I heard the question.
Did you make any recommendations about the deficiency that you said that we had?
Yeah, we recommended on the deficiencies that the management look at year-end closing procedures. Again, some of these entries that we had made as a part of our audit are bond-related, and just to implement better year-end closing procedures so those adjustments could be made prior to the information being provided to us. And I believe that's management's response, that they're going to implement some procedures to improve that process.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Michael? Stephanie, I have two for you. The first is the GASB list of 12 pending requirements. My first question is, are we reviewing them for future compliance or applicability?
Yes, as a new pronouncement is released, that is constantly being reviewed. Michael and I will talk throughout the year before the year-end process of the audit, and as things come up, GFOA sends out management recommendations, MML sends out different publications and explanations on different things. So as things are coming up, the information is being provided and is researched internally.
Okay, so those 12 GASB, which I gather were postponed because of COVID. I'll be careful I've asked this. Are they all applicable to us? You know, they may be the requirement, but they may not be applicable to a city our size or something like that. So I'm trying to get my arms around how significant are those 12?
Michael can correct me if I'm wrong. When we reviewed the 12, we reviewed these during the audit process. None of them were really coming out like a retirement obligation like we had a couple years ago, or a fixed asset obligation that we had several years back. These are just small things that we are considering at the time. Again, we may look at them and it may not apply. We may look at them, it may not apply now, and they may change it and it may apply later. So that's the communication that he and I have on a regular basis.
Okay, so we're not
Yes.
waiting to them, they're COVID postponed. I don't know if that postponement was lifted or not, but I could take from your answer that we're on it, we're implementing it, and there's no surprises.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I will add that we do, as far as list all the pronouncements that are coming out that have been issued. Again, as I said, there's a significant number of these that will more than likely have no impact whatsoever on the city's financial statements. And Stephanie is correct. When we look at anything coming up within the next year or two, we have discussions to go ahead and plan for whatever information might be needed so that those can be properly implemented when they're effective.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Stephanie, Michael, or John?
And
If not,
also,
Stephanie-
also to clarify, there were only 12, Michael, only 12 audit adjustments this year. So it wasn't like there was that many.
Yeah.
That's true.
Hey, great job to staff. I mean, just going through an audit of this level of detail is a trying experience, and you still have to do your day job. So thank you for everything you did, John. Stephanie, staff, it's always nice to get an audit with no exceptions.
So unless there's any other questions, can I recommend a motion to accept the independent audit for fiscal year 2020?
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Ann, second by Carolyn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion is approved.
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Thank you very much, and if there are any questions at some point, certainly you can contact Stephanie and she can forward those questions to me via email or provide you with my cell phone contact. And thank you very much, and I hope everybody has a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deanne, I want the record to be complete, and I'm sorry I forgot you were on Zoom. Did you support the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Lori, if you can make the record reflect that. Thank you. We have no old business tonight. Moving on to new business, we have 3 items. The first is an ordinance allowing a minor subdivision at 810 Sousa.
Okay, yes, this is a minor subdivision, Jordan and Jordan Designs Plat Number 1 on Soast Road. The property is highlighted on the aerial map. There is a fairly new house that's been fairly recently constructed on the property. The property is zoned R1, which is the single-family zoning district. The request is to subdivide this lot into 2 lots. basically have one lot with the current house on it, and then another lot about the same size that would allow for the applicant to construct another house on this new lot. So basically, just to summarize, this will create 2 residential lots. There will be a stormwater fee and a parks fee that we'll have to pay prior to being able to record the plat if this is approved. Other than that, it appears to be in compliance with all requirements. You have any questions for me? Oh, and the Planning and Zoning Commission did look at this at their last meeting and did recommend approval with a vote of 5-0.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom? Megan?
I was just going to ask, I seen it said that there has to be some modification to the sidewalk. Who would be paying for that?
The applicant, basically we've got it worked out to where the applicant will be making a change basically when they build the new house. And basically what it is the current sidewalk isn't quite 5 feet wide. It's close, but not quite. And so when they go to build the driveway for the new house, they'll have a 5-foot section that will allow for that passing zone for if 2 people have to be in a wheelchair and pass each other.
Okay, so they'll be paying for it then?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Tom? If not, can we have the first reading?
An ordinance to approve the minor subdivision final plat of Jordan and Jordan Designs, plat number 1.
There's a written request for council to consider waiving the rules and having the second reading. What is council's desire on that?
I'll make a motion to suspend the rules.
I'll second.
The motion
Oh,
and
yeah.
motion made and second. Final reading, please.
An ordinance to approve the minor subdivision final plat of Jordan and Jordan Designs, plat number 1.
Yeah. I took that a little out of order. Took that a little out of order. Okay. There's a motion and second to waive the rules. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is the floor open for discussion?
Do what?
Is the floor open for discussion on that?
Questions?
Yeah. I don't, is there a reason why we're waiving the rules on this? Are they requesting because they need something, or we're just?
It's not city staff's recommendation to do it, although the applicant did in his written statement here provide a reason why he was requesting it.
There's a closing date. There's a closing date issue. He had a closing date, it looks like, on April 30th, and he had to move it back to May 30th, and so that's why the request has been made.
I would remind council that I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, but it's not necessarily the city's problem, unless the city did something to inherently delay the process. Did the city do anything, Tom or John, out of the ordinary to delay this process?
No, we've got it to you as fast as it could be gotten to you.
Okay, so would you say that the delay was possibly due to the applicants not understanding the process?
Not exactly. The applicant stated to me, I don't know, I can't remember what he put in the letter, but that it took him an unexpected amount of time to get the property surveyed and turned in.
Okay, so the bottom line, it wasn't the city's quote-unquote fault, if that's going to bear into your decision. So, Lister, is that?
Yeah, and they're not here, are they?
I don't think so.
The only question I have is, are we not allowing the members of that live on that street an opportunity by going through this? Are we keeping them from having a voice in this? I mean, adding another lot, does that present a problem? Are we putting ourselves in a position where someone could split? I mean, I have 6/10 of an acre. I don't have a desire to do it, but are we putting ourselves in a position where someone could overload a street? I hate to deny an individual the right to build on property, but I don't think we're doing that by delaying. But I have also.
My understanding from reading it was that most of the properties are smaller lot sizes. This happens to be an twice as large lot that was not, probably back in the day, not developed. I mean, that's what was my take, but.
I'm not making a recommendation that you do or you don't, but I will offer this. The public oftentimes does not see in advance what these zoning and lot splits and everything else look like until a meeting like this. So things are posted, how many people walk by and go up and look at the little sign type of thing. So one of the reasons you may want to consider for the 2 weeks is to give people in that neighborhood an opportunity to be aware of this. Now, this may not be a significant, may not be a great example because it's a big lot and so on and so forth, but in general, there are some very valid reasons for that 2-week period. Rob?
Yeah, I understand that. So I saw this in the packets, and I saw that it was going to be a kind of a special circumstance. So I went by there and looked at the lot, and it does, like, if you drive by it, it does look like, for whatever reason, the original intent looked like it was to be 2 lots, and they're all about that size there, if you split it up. So while I was there, I actually went and knocked on some doors. And I cannot say that I spoke to everybody. I did speak to 3 neighbors who were right in that proximity, and I got 2 neutrals and a positive. And so that's what I saw. And I think it would be actually a win-win. Of course, I get what you're saying there, Matt. As far as that's concerned, but. I think that a good house there would actually improve property values anyway, so.
Any other questions or discussion? So there's a motion and second to waive the rules and have the final reading. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Final reading, please.
I don't know if we got to count on that.
I didn't hear any no's, unless there were some.
Yeah, there was, I heard.
Oh, were there no's? Okay, let's do a show of hands. All in favor of the motion to waive the rules and have the final reason, please raise your hand. Deanne? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so did you get that count? Everybody put their hands down too quick.
Yeah.
The yeses, up high, up high. Come on. Lori plus Deanne. Okay.
And Deanne was a yes?
Yes. So that was a majority, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Final reading, please.
An ordinance to approve the minor subdivision final plat of Jordan and Jordan Designs Plat Number 1.
Is there a motion to approve?
Make the motion. Second.
Motion by Carolyn, second by Jody. Roll call vote.
Murphy?
Yes.
Lyons?
Yes.
Mayberry?
Yes.
Bolin?
Yes.
Renaud?
Yes.
Steen?
Yes.
Kessinger?
Yes.
Higgins?
Yes.
Everly?
Yes.
Lawrence?
Yay.
Fridley?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
12 ayes.
Motion is approved. Second item is an ordinance allowing a minor subdivision at 511 Christie Drive. Tom?
This is the Deer Crossing East Number 5 plat, minor subdivision to subdivide the property into 2 lots. The property is highlighted on the aerial photo. It's off of Southview Road. The property is zoned R1, which is the single-family zoning district. The request is to subdivide the property into 2 lots. As I said, the first lot will be, it's around, I think it was around 40 acres, and then the second lot was about 3 acres. This lot is actually being sold to the property owner just to the south, which also has a very large property. For some financial reasons I don't understand, they aren't doing this as a request to sort of, as a lot, kind of like a lot line adjustment. It's too big for an actual lot line adjustment, but they aren't doing this as a request to basically take this piece of property and add it to the other lot that's being proposed as a second lot. As I said, it's because of some issues with the banks, and you'd had to redo your loan and those sorts of things. So it's being purchased and being reviewed as if they're creating a separate lot, even though we know that it's under contract to be purchased by the property owner to the south.
Now, let me make sure I understood that. So there's a 40-acre tract that is going to be subdivided into two individual lots. Whoever's buying them is sort of irrelevant, I think. Doesn't matter if the person is the south or the person was 20 miles away, but is that correct?
Well, the large piece is still being retained by the
Okay.
current
So the
owner.
40 will be split into two, and,
But the smaller piece
There happens
is
to be a-
being set up as a separate standalone lot, yes.
okay, and there
They
is,
could have done this as a different way of doing it, basically where there was 2 lots, and then at the end, there'd still be 2 lots, but instead, because of the way they're doing this, there's an additional lot being created. Because the property owner's
I'm not
south.
any clearer.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry.
See the mouse?
Right.
The person who's buying it owns this property here.
Right.
And so we're creating a lot through here. So at the end of the day, we'll have 1, 2, 3 lots, because this is
But-
a separate
But the
standalone
third is
lot.
already bought and sold, that's irrelevant.
Yes. But what could have happened if it wasn't for this, you'd had to redo your loan and all that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
they could have
just
absorbed that.
moved this line up, and we would
Okay.
have still had 2 lots.
I got it, thank you. Jody?
So at some point, are we anticipating the possibility that the southern owner will come back and want to consolidate those 2 lots into one?
I don't,
Is there any
they may do that, they could do that, as far as that goes. Right now, we're reviewing this as if it'll be a standalone lot, because that's what was submitted.
So it wasn't just to square off that second piece? I mean, it looks in the drawing. that-
Correct, it's becoming less squared off with this application, actually, because the line is shifting further. This is the existing line down here, and now it's moving up and kind of jogging around a little bit, so it's becoming a little bit less regular. And that was basically if I go back to the air photo, you can see there's existing building, there's a barn and driveway and all that, so this is just sort of stay out of the way of that existing building and all that.
Mr. Rennick, do you have anything that you want to offer?
Just a simple situation where Pelosi's wanted to add more property to what they already bought from me, and because they enlarged the pond, and when they did that, that pond kind of invaded the original line. They just wanted more elbow room basically along the pond. So what I've done is kept the same pivot point to the entrance of my property and just turned that to the northeast.
Yeah.
And that just allowed them to then have that elbow room and still retain our 40 acres and our house in the woods, basically. So there's just the Pelosi's house and then our house in the woods. I know it looks kind of funny on the plat, but it really looks fun.
There's a reason behind it.
Yes, there is.
I got it, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Rennick or Tom?
Well, just to summarize, this application would create 2 residential lots, even though there was one before, so it creates an additional one. Because this is being reviewed as a new standalone lot, there will be some sidewalks that'll be required along that new lot. There will also be some stormwater fees that will be due on that new lot. Something will need to be worked out on that prior to being able to record the plat. Other than that, it appears to be in compliance with all requirements. Planning and Zoning Commission did take a look at this at their last meeting and did recommend approval, a vote of 5-0.
Tom, I know we had sidewalk confusion over there in 2019 or so. Is there any confusion regarding that sidewalk along Southview?
At least along Lot 18, what is being requested this time is that they'll be required to either pay the money for it, or build it, or provide a guarantee that it will be done.
And when one of
to-
those 3 options
Yes,
determined?
yeah. The applicant, in discussions with the applicant, what they are opting to do is they're going to enter into a contract with a person to build the sidewalk, and then place they'll enter into an agreement with the city, and I'm not sure exactly how the financial part will go, but there'll be an agreement that will be agreed to before they'll be able to record the plat.
Yeah, they'll deposit with the city the $7,000 for the sidewalk, and when the work is completed, we'll release that.
I got you. All right, so the normal way.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Tom? If not, first reading, please.
An ordinance to approve the minor subdivision final plat of Deer Crossing East B.
Last item under new business is a motion to approve the street closure for the Great Race.
So city staff received a request from Chamber of Commerce for some street closure for the Great Race on June 2nd, or 22nd, I'm sorry, it's a Tuesday. It'd be a portion of 4th, 5th, and Cedar Streets. There's a map in your packet detailing where those closures would be. It's near Detroponis, and the closures would be from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And if you got any questions about the event, I believe Amy from the Chamber is here to answer those for you.
Let's separate the event questions from closing the street questions. So are there any questions for Darren regarding the street? Carolyn?
It looks like whether you're going to close the street is the only access points that customers have to go into Benton Square during that time frame.
So I think Benton
they-
Square is hosting the,
Well, Detroponis, sorry, Amy, Tourism Director with the Rolla
Sorry.
Chamber, introduce myself to the new council members. So we are going to, Detroponis is going to be hosting the lunch. We are partnering with them. We are leaving these side parking lots of Benton Square open and the access into those parking lots open. So we are using that big giant parking lot on that side of 5th Street. So we're just needing to be able to pull, and the only reason we have that portion of 5th Street closed is so the racers can walk into Benton Square without getting run over. So, but they'll just have kind of like a little access into there, but Benton Square's parking lots will still be open.
Oh, okay, thank you.
To clarify, any other questions on that part?
Sort of a double, I'm not sure who would answer. So we did this 2 years ago or last?
2015.
And were there any issues with the street closures at that point with anybody?
At that time, we did it on Pine Street, and we kind of had a big festival to go along with it. We had it on a Saturday, so we were pretty fortunate till we could turn it into a big festival. We were supposed to host this last year in June, and because of COVID, the race was canceled and rescheduled for August, and then of course things didn't improve, so they canceled and rescheduled for this year. So basically the plans are exactly the same. Again, would have loved to have it on a Saturday, but unfortunately it's coming through on a Tuesday, but we'll take it. And the public is invited to come out for free, look at the cars. It's a really awesome race. It'll be about 100 cars, and the newest car will be a 1974, so it's classic antique cars. Really cool.
Any other questions?
Amy, we've been having some discussions just at the city about all these events and closing parking lots and closing streets. In this particular case, I don't think there's any sales that go on with this particular
No,
event.
there is no sales. It's simply that we are hosting the lunch for them. It's a really cool thing. This event starts in San Antonio, Texas, and it travels through 8 states and will end in South Carolina. So it's just an opportunity to bring a national event through our community, an opportunity for something for our public to see for free. It's a great tourism opportunity because we get national coverage for this event. So,
Thank you.
Rob?
Can you tell me a little bit more about the race? It sounds pretty exciting. So, like, what date? And I don't see it here. I see it right here.
Yeah, it's basically it's kind of like a road rally endurance race, but the racers start they don't all start at the same time. So they'll basically, the first ones will come through about 11:45. The last one will come through about 2:30. They have to abide by all street laws and stop signs and lights and everything like that. So it's not like we're asking for, having to close as they come through. They have to abide by all laws.
I guess the question I have is this going to be something that the citizens can watch and see?
Yeah, definitely, and we are already
Cool,
promoting
that's
that as
awesome,
such, and here in Rolla and also surrounding communities, and actually as it gets closer to time, we'll promote it more. So yeah, the public is invited to come and see the vehicles, and like I said, because the racers will stop, park their cars, they'll go inside and eat, and they're all on display. I don't know if any of you remember it from 2015, but it was a really cool opportunity to see some cool cars, so.
I mean, I remember they're vintage cars, but do you remember what the years that they?
They can not be anything newer than 1974.
Okay.
Wow.
So. Any other questions?
No other questions? Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the street closure for the Great Race?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Rob, seconded. Ann. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Deanne?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion is approved. Claims and/or fiscal transactions, we have one. It's a motion to award a bid for the purchase of a hydraulic breaching tool.
Good evening.
No picture?
No picture of this. What this is a portable, battery-operated hydraulic breaching tool that will be used by our tactical operation people. We found out on the last couple of call-outs that our TAC unit had to do, our SWAT team had to do, that we were having trouble with doors and putting our officers in situations that were very dangerous. What this tool will do, plain and simple, if we have a steel door, instead of taking forever and trying to get it with crowbars, which is basically what we have now, we can just put that tool in there. The officer can stand to the side and it will open the door without the officer having to stand there once the door finally gets open. It's also can be used for, it's like the jaws of life, basically what it is. It's got several different things that we can put on there. It can be used for cutting through locks. We can spread doors. Instead of damaging a door, we got a thing on there. What it does is just spreads the door where the door can pop open. This is extremely important on, like I said, steel doors. And for instance, like in schools, those are all steel doors. You can't kick those doors in once they're locked. And God forbid we have somebody lock themselves in one of the school rooms or something, or in the hospital, same situation. We can just bring that in there, and that tool will make it very easy for officers to get into the doors. This thing cost $9,995.95 was the lowest bid. And because the South Central Drug Unit uses our SWAT team for all of their raids and things that we do, they're paying for $8,440 of this. So this is only going to cost us $1,559.95, which we're going to take out of our drug seizure funds, so it doesn't affect our budget whatsoever.
Chief, for the new council and for the public, can you talk about the quote-unquote drug funds? Because they'll hear this term periodically during the course of the year with respect to expenditures.
We have a fund, which is seizure money that we get for our participation in the task force. And most of the money that we have now was from a very large seizure that one of our officers stopped on a highway years before I came here. That was, I think, almost $300,000 that was awarded to our department. We've been using that money. You are allowed to use that money for only two things: training and equipment. You can't use it to supplement your department in any way. You can't use it to pay for salaries. So we've been slowly using this to purchase equipment that we needed. All the computers that we have in our cars were purchased through our drug funds, and equipment like this. We have found out, like I said, on the last couple of call-outs we had, and both call-outs were active shooter incidents where we were terribly in need of a lot of equipment. And this was one of the first things that we're getting, this and some ladders and pole cameras and things like that, just for our officer safety. But this one cost so much I had to come before you to ask for the money,
So, Chief,
even though it
this is
came
not-
under 5
yeah.
cents.
This is not a slush fund, so can you, for their benefit as well, talk about the administrative oversight that goes into managing these
Yes,
dollars?
this is managed through the federal government. All of our drug funds are. It's a special fund. We have to, every year we have to make a report to the federal government on how much we have left, how much we spent. You cannot put this into an interest-bearing account. The money you get is the money you get, and that's the money you have to spend. We are probably down out of the money because we have spent it all for a lot of equipment, modernizing our police department. We're probably down to about $45,000 left in it and out of, which is what we're going to spend this just under $1,600 for out of that account.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief regarding either the drug fund mechanism or the actual acquisition of the Jody?
With regards to the drug fund and how much money is in it, can any of that money be used for equipment such as body cameras?
It could be used for body cameras, but the problem with body cameras is it's a recurring cost. So that is a budget item that we would not be able to use the drug funds for.
I just know at our last meeting we had approved the emergency fund for a new HVAC system again, and I had been told by teachers at our public school who don't have any windows in their classrooms that they didn't have AC, and I just feel like if we're going to be approving almost $100,000 for AC units, we really need to be looking at how to get our equipment to keep our people safe too, so that we can know what's going on with interactions with the police, and so it keeps all of you safe too, so there's no, they said this, they said that, we would have it on camera. And I really think we need to be looking at ways to make sure that this is happening, because I feel like that conversation stopped a while ago and we haven't picked it up anywhere since.
Any questions?
So Chief, how soon would you get this piece of equipment if it were to be ordered? I mean,
We'd probably get it in about a week or 2 weeks.
Question on the drug fund.
Yes.
Is that, I guess that grows, or that, how does that work? Like,
Well, we have not received any money from it since we got the very large amount. It's the law.
So you got to participate in the bust. So why don't you walk through that?
Yeah.
Well, say for instance, right now, the Drug Task Force has somebody working with St. Louis DEA, and St. Louis DEA gets involved in a very large arrest that has a lot of money. The Drug Task Force, because they participate in it, will get a percentage of that money, and it'll be sent to the Drug Task Force. If it's one of Rolla's officers that are also involved in it, we will also get part of that seizure.
Chief, if I can help.
Yes.
What we're talking about is asset forfeiture.
Asset forfeiture, correct.
So there's an arrest that's made, and it appears that there are assets that are related to drug activities. Those assets are seized.
Correct.
And it's my understanding that the South Central Drug Task Force participates in an agreement with the St. Louis DEA, whereby a percentage of that goes to the DEA in St. Louis, and then the remaining portion goes to what other ever law enforcement agencies are involved in the arrest. Is that correct?
Correct.
And going back to your earlier point, that fund cannot grow by interest bearing.
Correct.
Not only do you have to submit a report for how much is left, how much is spent, you also have to account for all of the purchases that are made, correct?
Correct.
All right. Did that answer your question?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief? If not, is there a motion to approve the bid for the hydraulic breaching tool?
Aye. Here. So moved.
Second.
Matt and
I'd say it the right way the next time.
any of those would work.
Some of those work.
Any other questions? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Let the record show one no vote. Citizen communication, is there any citizen that would like to speak to City Council? If not, Mayor, City Council comments, any council comments?
Mayor, oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to say, today I attended the funeral for Senator Dan Brown. I want to recognize the contributions that Senator Brown had for our community. having lived in this community for over 18 years, there were many times when Dan would come stand on the front porch of my house and talk to me about the issues that were going on in this community. And we lost a great man. So I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of myself and my family, to the Brown family for the contributions that Senator Dan Brown brought to our community.
Thank you, Matt. Terry?
I just want to say thank you to our first responders. One of my family members lost their home and their belongings a week ago, and the Rolla Fire Department was amazing. They were there quickly, and they even went back in after the fire was extinguished to get important things like car keys and wallet and shoes, because most of the people had just gotten out of bed. So I want to thank them very much. And the chief had a really big shoulder to hold some tears and and kind of help people. Also, RPD and MS&T police, they were there and they kept order with things and people from getting hurt by trying to, come in and see what was going on. The EMTs were there and they checked out the humans and the pets, and they give oxygen to both, which I thought was pretty great. Wow. Animal control was there and they brought pet carriers and offered support to the traumatized pets that were involved. And I also saw Judy Terry from Red Cross, saw her in action, and other Red Cross responders. And they brought needed items and information, some financial help, and of course for future assistance. And lastly, but certainly not least, the neighbors who stopped by to ask what they could do. They brought water, they brought snacks, they let people use their restrooms, they let people use their hoses so they could kind of clean off. I'm very proud of our community and grateful to the first responders, emergency people. So thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm so glad that everybody got out okay, even the animals. And one little note, check your smoke detectors, please, and make sure they're working. And if you don't have them, think about getting them, because they can save lives, and it's so fast when a fire starts. I didn't realize how quickly things went up, so think about that. And you can always call the fire department if you need some information or help. So, thank you.
Thank you, Terry, for that very nice summary. Chief, 2 questions on smoke detectors, about fires. You often quote a statistic that a fire doubles every X. What is that X?
30 seconds.
How much?
30 seconds.
Okay, so the physical size of a fire doubles every 30 seconds.
Yes, sir.
That's awesome. Second question, smoke detectors. Do we have any program grants or anything like that for those that maybe can't afford, or an elderly person that doesn't have a way to install them or anything like that?
We do. We have a couple of different options. If a person shows need, we can assist them in installing a smoke detector in their bedroom and or hallway to ensure their safety to get out. Most hallways exit from a bedroom go to an exit. So that's why we encourage you to cover the whole route of the exit, not just the bedroom, but the route. So typically that's 2 smoke detectors in a home at least, and that's just a 1 bedroom. Every bedroom should have one, and every hallway to the exit should have a smoke detector in it. We have a couple of programs there. One is through PC Can, and if they show need, they can receive a smoke detector, and we would be glad to install it in the city limits of Rolla. We install smoke detectors upon request. I'm a built-in ladder. You don't have to take a ladder. No damage if you don't have to take a ladder in, okay? Just think of a bunch of type A alpha male and female firefighters with a ladder in your house. Okay, not a good combination. So I typically go and I kid. but we do, I install a lot of smoke detectors. But we would do that for free inside the city limits. Our partners, Rolla, would be glad to assist you if you live outside the city limits. So we have access to do it. We do this very often for elderly. They should not be climbing ladders. And if we can set up a time and easily go there and assist them and install it. We put batteries. We have sweet little ladies who call us and say it's that time of year. If your smoke detector beeps every 30 seconds, you should not ignore that, all right? And it's very irritating. If it beeps every 30 seconds or so, your smoke detector battery is bad. Put a new battery in it, and you will be a lot happier person, right? And it doesn't work if it doesn't have a battery in it. This is a smoke detector. They're simple, they're small, and they're $5. I give these to my nephews and nieces for Christmas. They hate me. I love them. And I have, just to talk a little bit about paranoia, I have 16 smoke detectors in my home. They're all wired together. Every room in my house has a smoke detector in it, closets, all of them, so I'm well protected. Don't do that. Hallways and bedrooms. That help?
Yes, very much.
Call us. Call 364-3989. Numbers in the book, our webpage. We will help you get a smoke detector.
Thank you.
And also,
Terry?
he gave me like a 5-second tutorial on how to use the fire extinguisher.
Very important.
Because if you haven't, you don't know how to use it, and it's time, it's like, what's the point of having it? So, 5 seconds. I
Pretty
feel like
simple.
a pro now.
Yeah, pretty easy. We can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan, did you have your hand up?
Oh, I did.
Oh, hand up. Okay.
Yeah, while we're giving out compliments and acknowledgements, I'd like to thank BMT's Fire Department and Phelps Health for the wonderful care that my son received. He had to go to the hospital last Sunday. He went through ER, the ICU, and he was in for several days. So the care was exemplary. They were top-notch in every way. You know, I was just very, very pleased, and I want people to know that Phelps Health is an amazing place. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, we don't have a closed session scheduled, so meeting adjourned.
All right.
What?